Welcome to my tutorial on C++. What you will need is Microsoft Visual Studios, and in order to get Microsoft Visual Studios, you would have to Google search it, and you just input Microsoft Visual Studios 2017 Community, click on the link, and from there it's going to give you the option of downloading the free one, which says 2017 Community free, or there's the professional ones, but there's also newer ones. Depending on the college, if you are in college, they might be able to give you the new ones. But if you don't want to waste any money, then just get the community one, which is free. But if you want to go a little bit more professional, then you pay a little extra. Alright, so we're going to start by making a new file project. New and project. Make sure it's in Visual C++. Make sure you have it on empty project. Now we're going to name it hello name, because we're going to get it to say your name. And while we're going through this, I'm going to explain different types of terms that we're going to be using within this program and try to make this as simple as possible so you can understand. This is just something simple, not something very difficult to do. And while I'm going to name it hello name, I want to make sure it's in desktop, which it already is, but for you it probably says source. But all you have to do is just click on desktop. When you browse, select folder. It's going to make it easier for whenever you want to look for it. It's going to be like in a little folder, so don't look for it like in a, where it says like a C++ or anything like that. We're going to click OK, wait for it to load. Once it's downloading, we're going to want to make a C++ file. And the reason we want that is because that's where we're going to have all our coding. So we're going to go to source files, add, new item. Make sure you right click on source files. Okay, once we click on new item, we make sure we're on Visual C++. Then make sure you click on C++ file.cpp, which is short for C++. Then we're going to name it hello name also. Feel free to pause it whenever you get confused or lost, or rewind it if you have to. If you have any comments or anything I could do better, just let me know and I'll try my best to redo this video to make it a little bit simpler for everyone. Alright, once we've named it, we click on add. After adding, we're going to have a little blank screen over here. That's where we're going to input our code. And from there, we're going to call some libraries. And the libraries are some of the things that we can call out because they're already made for us to make our life simpler. But sometimes if you don't want to use the libraries, you can make your own. But we'll get to that later. For now, we're just going to call out some libraries. You can feel free to Google some if you want to get to do more stuff with it. But for now, we're just going to hashtag include string. The reason we're going to include string is because we want it to say a text. We want an item that's going to include text, a variable. Variables are usually used to store. It's sort of like a locker. You put stuff in it. But this type of locker is you want to store text for a string. If you want to store numbers per se, you would have to do int, float, or double. Int is just integers like 1, 2, 3, 4. While float, it does the 1.2 and it'll keep it as 1.2. But whenever you transfer from a float variable into an int, it might just lose a number or so. And if you put double, it'll store more than a tens place. So if you were to do an int variable and you wanted it to store a 1.5, it wouldn't store it. Instead, it will cut out the 0.5 and just do 1. It won't round up at all. And that's a different library you would have to call if you would want it to round up. The float is more like if you want to show the tens place, the 1.7, 1.8, and it'll store it like that. Double if you want to store something longer. But we're not going to go into that. We're just going to do a simple string. Next thing we're going to include is going to be the iOS stream. See, it's kind of user friendly because it already shows me the options I have, which is the hashtag include. And next, like I said, we're going to include the iOS stream because we're going to want to do a cout or a cin. And what a cout or a cin is, a cout is used whenever we want to display a word or question, like for example, hello Mario. We wanted to say that. A cin is so it can store information that we input into the computer. So the variable, for example, our string that's holding our name, it's a cin and we have a cout. The cout asks, what's your name? The cin, you're going to make sure it has a variable, and that's going to store whatever name you put in there. I'll get to that further after doing a couple of things, because we're going to do it a little bit more up ahead. So next thing we want to do after including our libraries that we're going to use for this program, we're going to make sure we put using namespace standard. The reason we want standard is so we don't have to do certain things like calling out. They did not really explain, but standard, it makes it easier so we don't have to call out a certain variable every time. Instead, we just input whatever we want. Next thing we're going to do is create it's sort of like a function. This function is what's gonna hold our variables, our programming. So what it's usually called is in main parentheses, and then you're gonna want to make sure you have brackets, and so you want to make it look neat, so you're gonna have the brackets like this aligned, and here is where you're gonna start putting your programmings in. This is where we start to put string name. Like I said, we're gonna call out string name, string meaning it's gonna be a text, and name being the variable, what we want to call it, what it's going to be named. You got to be careful because whenever you want to call something out, it's text sensitive or case sensitive, meaning we have to call it out the way we typed it. It won't understand if we type it another way. Right? We already made our variable or our locker that's going to store a text for our name. Now we're going to want to do a cout, which is going to ask the user for its input. And what we're going to want to put in there, you see where it says cout? We have to call it every time. You see where it says std? We would have to put std in front. That's why we did the user using namespace std. So we don't have to put std every time we call these things out. Going back to cout. So cout is because we're going to want it to say something into the screen for us to see. And we have to make sure we put the arrows pointing this way because this is showing that we wanted to go outside. Next, we're going to put what we want to type inside, which is what is your name. Make sure that you put these, not the single ones, because the single ones is only for if you want to just put one thing like 1, 2. Because if you were to do just 1, it'll work fine. But if you were to do space, it'll give you an error because space is technically considered considered a character. So this is only for when you want to use one character. So let's go back to what we're doing. What is your name? This is going to appear on our screen. Space. Then we're going to have to put the arrows again whenever we want to start with something else. For example, if we want to put something behind that, or I mean in front of it, like and your day. But we're not going to do that since we're only asking for a name. Instead, we're just going to put endo. And what endo does is it's going to start a new line. And whenever you do something like this, you got to make sure you put a comma. The reason a comma is needed is so it can know this is what I need to do first, or this is where it ends. If you don't tell it this is where it ends, it's going to compile an error because it's not going to know where it starts, where it ends, or what it should do. Next, we're going to do cin, which is going to be where the user does their input. That's going to store what they want as their name. You got to make sure you have the arrows pointing out instead. The reason it's pointing out because it's going to go into the variable. So name, make sure you put these colons. And if you want to remember what each one does, you just do these, the forward slashes, 2 of them, because if you don't do 2 of them, it won't work. And then you type in whatever notes you want. For example, this holds text. So that way, if you forget, you can go back and you know what it does. Or this one, this asks for your name. This makes it easier for whenever you're programming because you can, like I said, go back and you know what each one does, and you can fix it if you have an error. Like if you don't like the way something's spelled and you don't know where exactly it is, you can go back to it easily reading the notes. If you don't have the notes, then it's harder to understand where you're at or for other people to understand what you're trying to do. So let's just put this stores user input for name. Right? Once we did that, we're going to want to do another cout so it can print out our name. And now we're going to put hello. And then we make sure we want to put a space because we don't want to put our name bunched up together. And then we get out of that, put a space again just to make it look neat. Arrows pointing inside of the cout. Then you call in your variable name. And remember, when we first did this, we did the cout what is your name, which is going to appear on the screen. And then name is whenever we type our name and then we click enter, here it's going to be stored. And it's going to be sort of like remembering it, what we put as our name. So whenever we call name out, it's not gonna literally put name, it's gonna put what we stored in name. But watch if I put name with a capital N. It has a little red line because it can't understand what this is. It doesn't know what it is. It's case sensitive, like I said, so it won't think it's the other name. Because sometimes you can have multiple names or multiple variables with the same name but different capitalization or lowercase. So let's go back to name. And then another endo, because we want to make sure that it ends, like it enters into a new line, not in the same line. Let's put this says hello, parentheses, your name. Just so you can know. And you see how I explained before on the cout where you could put extra stuff? This is where I mean hello, and then you did name. So if you wanted, for example, to do something after that, you could always do, if you want to say fun, you could, or have fun. Make sure it's in these, not in the single. But you gotta make sure you separate the endo with these arrows, because if not, it will work. Okay, so now we've got almost everything. The only other thing we need is a system pause. The reason we do system pause because it's gonna skip everything. It's gonna ask for your input. You put your input, but it's not gonna show anything else. Let me show you. So in order to run this, you go to build. You build solution. Okay, you wait for it to tell you if any errors pop up, but there shouldn't be if you copied it exactly the same way. Okay, so it says build 1 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 up to date, 0 skipped. Succeeded means everything was correct, there was no errors, the programming didn't get confused. Fail would mean there's something wrong, and something here would appear and it'll tell you line whatever that needs to be fixed. Sometimes it might say line something, but it won't be there. It might be much more before, and sometimes if it's much before, it might be just the semicolon that you put at the end of each one, so you know the computer knows where it ends. Right. Going back, once we've built it, we go to debug. We start without debugging, and you see how it asks for my name. What is your name? As the out mentioned, I'm gonna put my name, Mario, and then it showed it really quick, but I got out of it because I didn't input the pause. And that's why, like, there's some programs that will do it depending on which version you have. It'll pause it for you and you'll see what it types. But since this one doesn't have that, I have to put in system, then parentheses, and then these, pause, and then I have to make sure I end it with a colon. Okay? Next thing I have to do is rebuild. Okay, succeeded again. Then from there we go debug, start without debugging. As for name, Mario. And then hello Mario, have fun. But you see, I accidentally forgot to put a space for the front of it, so I put it together. So that's why you have to be careful. But luckily, I just click enter, take me out. I go back, and it says have fun. And I remember my name is here, the variable that's storing my name. So I want to make sure I put a space. Then I have to rebuild it again, because every time you do something new, you have to rebuild. Then you debug, start without debugging, do it all over again, and voila. Hello Mario, have fun. Feel free to mess around with any other variables or Google. I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope I also encouraged you to learn a little bit more about C++. Have fun.